Who do you think you are? Let me say this clearly. Outgrowing your old life isn't betrayal. It's evolution. And the idea that staying small is more loyal than growing into your truth, that's shame talking, not wisdom, not love, not courage. Growth will always feel like discomfort before it feels like freedom. We have this idea culturally, socially, even neurologically, that growth is supposed to feel good, that when we're evolving, there should be this instant surge of clarity, motivation, and purpose. But in reality, it often feels like confusion, disconnection, and fear. It's like your soul is trying to stretch out of skin that no longer fits, and all you can feel is the tightness, not the liberation that's coming. And there's a reason for that. In my research, I came across something fascinating and honestly deeply validating. When we're going through major emotional shifts, whether that's leaving a toxic environment, speaking our truth, or simply stepping into a fuller version of ourselves, the brain interprets that unfamiliarity as a potential threat. The amygdala, which is responsible for detecting danger, lights up in the exact same way it does when you're in physical danger. So your heart races, your stomach knots, your palms sweat, not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're doing something new. I remember the first time I decided to stop saying yes to things I didn't really want to do. It sounds small, but for someone who had spent her whole life making herself likable, agreeable, easy to be around, that decision felt like an earthquake. The first time I declined a request that didn't align with my values, I physically shook. My chest got tight. I immediately spiraled into, was that rude? Are they mad? Did I just ruin everything? But here's the thing. I've learned again and again, discomfort is the companion of authenticity. It walks alongside courage like a shadow. Every time we choose to step outside the version of ourselves that kept everyone else comfortable, we step into uncertainty. And our bodies react as if we're unsafe. Because safety has always meant belonging, even if that belonging came at the cost of our truth. Now, discomfort isn't always a sign that you're on the wrong path. Sometimes it's the clearest indicator that you're stepping into something honest, something more aligned, something you've never had the courage or the permission to fully claim. That's why so many people stay stuck. Not because they don't want more, not because they don't know better, but because the moment they start to move toward growth, their body screams, go back, play small, stay safe. And if we don't understand that biological response, we mistake that fear for a red flag instead of what it really is, a sign that you're leaving the old map and entering sacred new ground. So when it feels wobbly, when you're questioning everything and your nervous system is screaming at you to retreat, I want you to remember, this is how growth feels, not like a victory march, like vulnerability, like standing in the middle of the unknown with nothing but your integrity and a shaky kind of bravery. And that's not weakness. That's everything. Because freedom doesn't come before the fear. It comes after we walk through it. Loyalty that asks you to shrink isn't loyalty. It's a cage. This one's hard. It hits close to the heart, especially for those of us who've been taught that love equals sacrifice, or that being a good friend, good daughter, good partner means always showing up, even when it costs us parts of ourselves. So when we start to grow, we begin to listen to that quiet inner voice that says, this no longer fits. We often run headfirst into guilt. I've heard it so many times in research interviews and real conversations. If I change, will they still love me? If I set this boundary, will I lose them? If I say no, am I abandoning them? We confuse self-betrayal with loyalty because that's what we were modeled. Somewhere along the way, we picked up the message that love is proven through self-erasure, that to be worthy of connection, we have to make ourselves small enough to fit into other people's expectations. And I get it. That instinct to belong is ancient and primal. But I've also learned that true loyalty, real love, does not ask you to betray yourself in order to keep it. It took me a long time to unlearn that. I used to believe that I was being kind by ignoring my needs, that not speaking up was a form of compassion. But over time, that quiet, subtle suppression turned into resentment. And the truth is, you can't keep shrinking yourself to stay close to people and still expect to feel whole. That's not kindness. That's quiet desperation. And what I've found, both in my own life and in the data, is that relationships rooted in fear of change are inherently fragile. When someone says, "You've changed," it's often not a statement, it's an accusation. But here's the truth. You were meant to change. That's what living fully, courageously, and authentically requires. And if someone can't love you as you grow, they didn't love you. They loved your compliance. Now, that doesn't mean we stop loving people the moment we grow apart. Love doesn't just evaporate, but we do have to acknowledge when the shape of a relationship no longer supports who we're becoming. And that is painful. There's grief in it. There's loss, but there is also profound freedom. You get to ask, does this connection support my growth or stunt it? Do I feel seen here or just tolerated? Can I be my full self in this space? Or just the version that keeps the peace? If the answer keeps pointing toward silence, toward suppression, toward walking on eggshells, then I want to say this as clearly as I can. That's not loyalty. That's a cage. And you are not put here to live your life behind invisible bars built by guilt and fear. So no, walking away from dynamics that no longer align with your truth isn't betrayal. It's honesty. It's integrity. And sometimes the most loyal thing you can do for others is show them what self-respect looks like. So they're invited to rise too. Belonging doesn't require fitting in. It requires being seen. This distinction changed everything for me. For years, I confused fitting in with belonging. I thought if I could just read the room fast enough, mirror the energy, laugh at the right time, shrink the parts of me that felt too big, I'd finally feel like I belonged. But the truth is, every time I fit in, I was abandoning myself. And there's no real belonging when you're constantly editing who you are just to be accepted. When I was doing interviews for my research on belonging, one of the patterns that kept showing up over and over was this gut-wrenching paradox. The more people hustled to fit in, the more isolated they felt. And I remember sitting with that truth and thinking, of course. Because how can you feel connected when the version of you that's being accepted isn't even the real you? Belonging isn't about being liked. It's not about matching the group or being easy to be around. It's about showing up as your full, messy, unpolished self and still being welcomed. And let me tell you, that kind of belonging is rare, not because people don't want it, but because it requires something terrifying. You have to be seen fully, without armor, without performance. And being seen like that, it's vulnerable. It opens you up to judgment, rejection, discomfort. But it also opens you up to the kind of love that fills your soul, not just your schedule. The kind of connection that doesn't just tolerate your growth, but celebrates it. I remember someone in one of my groups saying, I just want to be in a room where I don't have to be the watered down version of me. And every head around the circle nodded, because we all know what it feels like to be in rooms that require performance over presence. It's exhausting, it's lonely, and it's not sustainable. But when you find those spaces, those people who look at the real you, the evolving you, the I'm still figuring it out you, and say, yep, you still belong here, that's when your nervous system settles. That's when your shoulders drop. That's when you exhale, not because you finally fit in, but because you finally stopped pretending. And that kind of belonging, it doesn't come from people pleasing or perfection. It comes from choosing to belong to yourself first. It comes from refusing to abandon who you're becoming in order to maintain approval from people who only love the past version of you. The truth is, the more you honor your growth, the more you'll outgrow the spaces that demand you stay the same. And that's not a failure. It's evidence of evolution. It means you're choosing something deeper than comfort. You're choosing alignment. And when you commit to being seen, really seen, you give others permission to do the same. That's where real belonging lives, not in the performance, in the presence. Boundaries are the bridge between who you were and who you're becoming. There's a moment in every growth journey where you realize that becoming someone new means doing things you didn't used to do, saying things you used to keep inside, drawing lines in places where you once allowed people to camp freely. And that moment, that's where boundaries come in, not as punishment, not as rejection, but as bridges. Bridges between who you were and who you are becoming. For a long time, I struggled with boundaries. Like many of us, I had been taught that being kind meant being available, that saying yes was a virtue, that the more accommodating I was, the more loving I must be. And I wore that belief like a badge of honor until I realized it wasn't kindness I was practicing. It was fear. Fear of disappointing people, fear of being seen as selfish, fear of losing connection if I dared to draw a line. But here's the thing I've learned. Boundaries are not the opposite of love. They are love. They are one of the clearest expressions of respect, not just for others, but for yourself. When you start to outgrow old roles, old relationships, old expectations, you need boundaries to protect the tenderness of who you're becoming. You're not trying to hurt anyone. You're just trying to live in integrity. One of the most common things I hear from people stepping into this season of change is, I don't even know how to talk to them anymore. Or I feel guilty for pulling away. And I always want to say, it's okay. That disorientation you're feeling isn't a sign that something's wrong. It's a sign that your emotional landscape is shifting. The old scripts aren't working because you're not reading from that script anymore. You're writing something new. And boundaries are the sentences in that new story. They say, this is where I end and you begin. They say, I can love you and still need space. They say, I respect myself enough to not abandon my values just to avoid tension. One of the most powerful truths I've had to internalize is this: clarity is kind. Ambiguity, especially around our needs, breeds resentment, confusion, and burnout. But clarity, even when it's uncomfortable, creates room for real connection. Because when people know where you stand, they get to make informed choices. You're not controlling them, you're inviting them into honest relationship. Boundaries also reveal who is capable of growing with you. Some people will get it, they'll adjust, they'll honor your shift, and some won't. Not because they're bad people, but because they're committed to the dynamic that existed before you started evolving. And it's okay to grieve that. It's okay to love people and still recognize they may not have a place in this new chapter. When you're building a new life, boundaries become your foundation. They hold the shape of who you're becoming, even when the world wants you to return to who you used to be. And while they may be uncomfortable at first, over time, they become second nature. They become your way of staying grounded in your truth while still showing up with compassion. Boundaries are not walls, they're doors. Doors that lead to deeper authenticity, healthier relationships, and a life that reflects the fullness of who you truly are. Outgrowing what once sustained you doesn't mean it wasn't valuable. This is one of the quiet heartbreaks of growth, realizing that what once gave you life now feels like it's holding you back. It could be a career you once dreamed of, a relationship that helped you survive, a belief system that once offered certainty. And when you begin to feel the friction, the urge to stretch beyond it, something deeper can rise up. Shame, guilt, this soft but persistent voice that says, how can you walk away from something that helped you become who you are? I've wrestled with this personally, and I've seen it show up again and again in the stories people share with me. We don't just fear change, we mourn it. because growth isn't just about becoming someone new. It's about honoring the version of yourself that helped you survive, even if that version can't take you where you're going next. I remember sitting with a woman who had spent 20 years in a career that had once lit her up. She was respected, successful, the go-to person in her field. And yet, every day she said she felt like she was living someone else's life. I feel ungrateful, she told me. This job gave me stability. It put food on the table. It gave me confidence when I had none. And I looked at her and said, yes. And now it's okay to say it no longer fits. See, the mistake we often make is thinking that if something isn't forever, it was a waste. But that's not how life works. Not everything is meant to last. Some things are meant to carry us through a season. Some people are meant to walk with us through a chapter. Some identities are scaffolding. We needed them to build something solid, even if we eventually take them down. It doesn't mean we were wrong. It doesn't mean we failed.